We've got flags and banners, and if you mind your manners, we might even get to standards and what they represent. So just take my voice's hand and we'll both try to understand how this Vexillologic podcast could be flagged for content. Flagged for content. What's up, VexHeads, and welcome to episode 55 of Flagged for Content. It's the only podcast celebrating its second birthday today, assuming you're listening to this on Saturday, which, do people listen to podcasts on Saturdays? I don't know. Let's find out together. Anyway, it is also a Flags for Good podcast, and what I recommend doing is heading on over to flagsforgood.com/flagged for content, for like the number, and picking yourself up a flag or two. They sell the flag of this show. They sell a ton of better flags than the one of this show. But regardless of what you pick up, you can put flagged for content, spelled the same way that you came to the site with, in at the checkout as the code, and save yourself a sweet 10% and help the show out a little bit as well. So we always appreciate that. Anyway, I did not write really anything else to say before this one, other than I did want to say there is a segment, I think around, after the second ad break in the third part of the show, where it's just guest questions. And those guest questions, those guestions, as I like to call them, come from the Discord, pretty much exclusively this time anyway. So if you want to be around to ask questions to future guests, anything like that, or just kind of be more in the know of the show, go ahead and join our Discord. It's on our link tree, which is linktree.com/flagged for content. I'll have it up here on the screen as well. And yeah, I mean, join the Discord. It's free to join anytime. DM me if you just want a code. It's fine. That said, all that out of the way, let's not dilly-dally any longer. We've got Ted Kaye on the show this week. We had an amazing conversation. Ted is a busy man. Like, he was jumping from one thing into this show to the next thing. He's always talking about and thinking about flags. And so it's great to be able to pick his brain about a lot of what I got to on this one. And not going to lie, he promised he would come back at some point. But until then, we've got him for this one. Let's go ahead and get into the episode. Folks, you're not going to believe it. We got him. I'll just leave it at that. You know him as the compiler of Good Flag, Bad Flag. You know him as the secretary and jack of all trades for NAVA. And you may know him as a consultant on flag changes through cities, counties, states, and even a nation. It's Ted Kaye!
Thank you.
What's up, Ted?
Thank you.
I can never tell how hard to go on those intros. It's Ted, that part.
It works.
Thank you. I like to think so. How's it going? You're up in Portland.
I'm wearing my flag shirt just for this occasion.
I saw that, and I did not wear I'm wearing a flag shirt of sorts. Shout out to Brad for his Seattle redesign, but you're outdoing me in that respect.
Indeed, that is a great design that.
Right?
Brad.
Big fan of the big old orca face.
Indeed.
Did you see any of that when it was like coming out or anything? Because I know you're in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know.
I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I'm in Portland.
Yeah.
And the Brad's flag derived from an effort where the press in Seattle was interested in the Seattle flag and potentially redesigning it. And the Seattle Times called me up for an interview about flag design and asked the standard questions of what makes a good flag design, et cetera, et cetera. And I gave all the standard responses. And then I realized this is Seattle talking. And I mentioned I'm in Portland, and Portland has a great flag design compared to Seattle's. And of course, that's what they ran with in the Seattle Times. Portland has great flag. We don't. We need to get a better flag. Let's do it. And that's what helped launch the competitions in Seattle.
Yeah, I find like a few of them, actually, especially now that states have started doing them like more and more like dominoes almost. It is a lot like, hey, our neighbor, like, well, Utah, for example, they were like, we're one of the four corner states. all other three have fantastic flags and we don't. So
That's
I
right.
definitely understand the envy angle.
Yeah, in fact, Senator Dan McCay, who was the prime mover getting the Utah flag all the way across the finish line, created a graphic of the map of the Four Corner states with the states filled in with the state flags and showed that to his colleagues in the legislature and said, look, here's Colorado and Arizona and New
Yeah.
Mexico with great flags, and then look at what we've got for Utah.
Right. And
Utah's a really interesting case because it's really the first state flag to get changed in recent memory to improve its design rather than to remove some offensive symbolism.
okay. Yeah, that's something that I had not thought about and don't have on the dock here, but worth going into. I honestly cannot think of another one that was Mississippi. But no, Mississippi fits your second definition. So does current Minnesota. There are a few that maybe soon, like Illinois, etc., but those haven't happened yet.
That's correct.
I cannot think of another one that's been improved or that's been set forth to improve just on design merits.
That's right. I think the closest to the finish line is Maine,
Yep.
where the effort is to replace the current flag with a previous flag, which is a much better design. Of course, in the remove offensive symbolism category, there's Massachusetts, whose commission has foundered, but it was to remove the troublesome depiction of the Native American on the flag.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to be thinking about long after this recording is over. But anyway, we have got to go ahead and kind of get into what's on the flagpole today and maybe talk about that more in the Patreon. But for the VexHeads, what is on the flagpole today is we have an extra beefy set of underrated flags. You'll see. We've got an overrated flag. We're going to go over the good flag, bad flag pamphlet in great detail, I'm sure. We'll talk about Ted's tenure at NAVA and what all that entails, a little bit about some polling in recent years, and finish everything off with some fantastic questions from you VexHeads. But first, before we get into any of that, Ted, I like to ask my guests, what is your favorite flag?
It's hard to say because I like to say it's the most recent flag I've acquired for my collection. That's an easy way out. But I'm not going to let you or have you let me off so easily. I'd say that in design-wise, when I'm talking to people about flag design, I like to invoke Japan and Canada as super flag designs for many reasons. Perhaps the most important is I can say those words and people can bring up the design in their heads. And that shows what a great design it is. Japan's flag is symmetrical, both horizontal and vertical axis. Canada's is symmetrical over the horizontal axis. Just two colors and deep meaning in those flags. And they fulfill the fundamental purpose of flags, which is signaling at a distance.
Right. Yeah. And I guess you're a big fan of red and white as well in that case.
Not necessarily, although I do have a degree from Stanford, so
I did a little bit of research.
Psychological there.
Even though we've met, I did a little bit of research, and I did find that it's not quite cardinal, I guess, but okay. So Japan and Canada, those are definitely like that does kind of set a clear definition of like not who Ted is, but what Ted values, I guess, in a flag. And as you laid out, do you have a preference between the two? And maybe it's like a real Sophie's Choice thing, but I find that while they are very similar, the Canadian Pale is something that I assume Canada invented. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called a Canadian Pale, and is kind of intriguing on its like in its own right. Given like if you were to see the two at a distance and it didn't have the red Canadian Pale stripes, they would look very similar. The fact that it does, I think, kind of pushes it over the edge for me and makes it a little bit better than Japan. But I don't know if you have any strong opinion either way on that.
They're both both top flags for various reasons, and I won't choose among my children. I won't choose among my two favorite flags here.
That's fair. That's fair. So it's
Although I do want to say that fun thing about the Canadian flag is if you view the central charge, the Canadian pale with its red maple leaf, as negative space, where the red is the negative space and the white is what you're looking at, you can actually see two arguing Canadians butting heads.
I'm gonna have to do that. The
We have
viewers
to
will
look
see
at
it on
a
the
Canadian
screen.
flag. If you look at it, the upper part, you can see the mouths wide open, the noses sticking down, and the heads butting. It's wonderful.
I'm gonna have to like I know obviously what it looks like, but oh yep. Yep, I can see that. I can absolutely see that. Canadians are not known for their arguing, but you know, I guess it works
One's
here.
French Canadian and one is not. How's that?
That's fair. That is totally fair. Yeah, one's coming from the east, one's coming from the west. Yeah, makes sense. It makes sense. All right, cool. So yeah, those both make sense. They're both simple. They're elegant. I can understand why they are your favorites, or at least among them. You also gave me some details on your first flags acquired, which seems like we're probably going back to what, like the 80s here?
Yeah, let's see. I dug out some flags here. Here it is. This even
That
in the
literal one.
This is the literal one. This is the flag of French Polynesia. This is a yacht courtesy flag. I thought I was going to collect this size flags, sort of a 12 by 18 size.
I know how
And
that goes. Yeah.
I quickly gave up on that because I couldn't get that size. So now I really collect 3 by 5s.
Mhm.
But I was living in Chile, and my wife and I took a vacation to Tahiti, and I bought a French flag and a French Polynesian flag. This is undefaced.
I was going to ask, yeah.
Sometimes you see a symbol in the middle here, but this is the very first flag I bought to start my flag collection.
Gotcha. And when you bought it, did you know you were starting a flag collection?
I sort of did, and my idea is that I collect flags of places I've traveled to. They're my travel mementos. That's really what got me into flags. And in a sense, I'd started a few years before when I was backpacking in Central America, and I put patches on my pack for each country I went through.
Wow.
So I've been to Mexico. I've been to Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Panama, Costa Rica.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So these, in a sense, are proto flags that I had collected, and it's the idea of travel trophies.
Yes.
I've been there. I've got the flag. Bring it back. Hang it in the chapel.
Yeah.
Like a regimental flag.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners and viewers can relate to that. I myself, I will say, like, well, my first ever flag was when I had to do a little report on the country of Norway when I was in 5th grade, I think. And just so happened that my family and I went to Disney, and we went to like Disney World and Epcot that year. And we went to the little Norway thing, and I got a little Norway flag. I was like, hey, Dad, Mom, it's the country I'm doing the thing on. And subconsciously, I've never really thought about it too much, but subconsciously, that might be why I like Scandinavian cross flags so much.
Could be. I think I have a similar drawing from 5th grade of a state flag from some project.
Yep.
That I can't argue started my interest in flags, but
Right.
certainly was awareness. And actually, when I was in 5th grade, I remember the Weekly Reader, which was a publication that we got. I remember the article about the new Canadian flag. So I was aware at age 10. And something that we've learned polling NAVA members, we've asked in our surveys, at what age did you first become interested in flags?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple peaks in that range, but the first one is around age 10. The second one is late teens. But age 10 seems to be where a large number of NAVA members first got interested in flags.
That makes sense. That's about when I did. Just I've said it on the show here before, so I don't bore the listeners with it. But yeah, just digging through an atlas basically and memorizing capitals, countries, flags, and the flags were the thing that stuck out the most, I guess, as it were. But yeah, I'm like you. At least when I started my collection, I've found that through doing the show, I would like to have a few extra flags. I've never been to Kyrgyzstan, but I do have it behind me for the listeners who can't see it. But yeah, I started off exactly that way, getting patches and flags, like physical flags themselves. If I couldn't find a 5x3, I'd get a 2x or whatever, a 2x3, I guess, and just figure it out later, kind of thing. But
well, I think it's important for any collection to have some kind of organizing principle. Otherwise, you just spend all your money and you don't have any focus. I have 2 rules for my collection. One, I have to have been to the place to own the flag. And that spares my friends of feeling any obligation to get me a flag when they travel.
That's fair.
And the second is the flag has to come from the place.
Yes.
I can't go to Norway and come home and go down to Elmer's Flag and Banner and buy a Norwegian flag.
Right.
My Norwegian flag comes from Norway. It might be made in China.
I was going to ask, like, as far as provenance.
It's what Norwegians use. And so every single one of my flags in my collection is earned in that way and is a memory for me. And I'll tell you, tracking down flags in other places can be quite an adventure.
I was going to ask you to go on because I'm sure you'll answer.
My wife's often with me on these jaunts. We found flags in the obvious places, flag stores, but sporting goods stores, hardware stores, ship chandlery, just a regular department store kind of place. But religious objects, because of religious parades and things. My favorite, though, was outside of Salzburg in Austria. It was a flag store and nail salon.
That is a combo.
It actually was a nail salon with a little rack of flags.
Right. But, okay.
Not your typical. I think my favorite story about that, though, was in Bolivia. We were in La Paz and traveling around, 14,000 feet in La Paz. And we got a cab driver to take us around. We said, take us to a place to buy a flag. He had no idea. And of course, the pre-cell phones or anything. So he's stopping and asking his friends, where do we buy flags? And a couple people pointed him in the same direction, which was a flag. It was a fabric store. And I said, I don't want fabric. I want a flag. Say, no, that's where you get a flag. So he took us there, and I go in, and it's old school fabric store with the bolts of fabric in the bins in the walls and a big counter, with the yardsticks or the meter sticks on it.
Yeah.
And my Spanish was pretty good. I was working in Chile, and I said I'd like to buy a Bolivian flag, and the Bolivian flag, of course, is a horizontal tri-bar. Yep. The green, the yellow, and the red, and the tri-bar there, and I said I want to buy a Bolivian flag, and the lady at the counter said, how much flag do you want? And I thought, my Spanish is good enough. I said,
right.
You mean, how many flags do I want? And she says, no, how much flag do you want? And she goes over and pulls out this bolt of fabric that was 3 stripes sewn together on this bolt. And she pulls out this bolt, throws it out about 6 feet long, and says, how much flag do you want?
Oh.
And I said, I want one flag's worth. How wide is this? Okay. And she said, okay. And I said, what do I do next? She said, well, come back in half an hour and I'll have it sewn up for you. So this was, my flag was custom made for me in a sense in Bolivia, but they used, I think they used the fabric for draping as well, for bunting,
right.
On a balcony or something like that. But
yeah, that makes sense.
The flag collection has been a way to organize our tourism jaunts as well.
Yeah.
Always something to do in a foreign place. Okay, let's find a place to buy the flag.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, sometimes I've never had one that's as difficult as that. Although I will, maybe, because I have been places where you just couldn't buy one. You just could not find it. one of the more tragic examples of that was I lived abroad in Metz, France, in the Lorraine region. And, you know, I was interested in flags then. Like, I did a bunch of traveling then, went to Poland, Slovakia. I missed Kryštof in Czechia, unfortunately. But yeah, I did a lot of traveling, got a lot of flags from all those places, and I could not find anywhere in Lorraine to buy a Lorraine flag. And yet it's on the buses, it's on the trains, like at least the coat of arms part is with the Alarions or whatever they're called. It's everywhere, and yet you cannot find one in Metz, and that can be incredibly frustrating. So,
well, I'll admit that. Note that I have to have been to the place, and the flag has to come from the place.
mm-hmm.
But there have been times, for example, I was in Gibraltar in 1985, and just there for an afternoon. It was a Sunday, and I couldn't find any place to buy the flag. Years later, I thought, hey, I don't have a Gibraltar flag. I've been there.
Right.
So I actually ordered a Gibraltar flag from a ship's chandlery in Gibraltar.
Right. Okay.
And, you know, it was quite expensive compared to just buying it locally. But
yeah,
I got a flag that Gibraltarians would use.
Right. That's exactly where I knew you were going with that. And yeah, I would have done the same thing. Yep. All right. So we have got to kind of move on as much as, like, honestly, I feel like I could talk to you all day. Let's go ahead and get into the underrated flags. You gave me a few, and honestly, I'm fine to touch on all of them if you want.
Sure. Well, you asked about underrated flags, and I was trying to think of how to respond to that. And
yeah,
first, I think it's important to say that we're talking about flag design. Not talking about the meaning of the flag or how it's valued by the people it represents or any of those things. We're talking about just one dimension of flag studies, which is the design itself. And I recognize that sometimes a flag with a poor design can still be beloved and valued by a community. And so when we talk about good flag, bad flag, that's really shorthand for successful design, unsuccessful design. That's just not as catchy a title as good flag, bad flag. Yeah. So when I talk about an underrated design in response to your question, I thought, well, let's take a look at the survey that NAVA just did of the 300 plus new American city flags that have been adopted since Roman Mars did his TED Talk in 2015. And I thought, well, this is actually an easy question to answer because I can look at the results and say, which of these designs do I think should have been rated much more highly? I think that met your definition. So I just scanned through those in response to your question and thought, okay, here are a couple. First one is Lexington, Kentucky. Okay, Lexington and Kentucky, horse territory, bluegrass, et cetera, et cetera. Lexington has a flag. It's gone back and forth in terms of representing the region and the city, et cetera, et cetera. But the design of the flag, which is a blue horse on a white field, is just spectacularly simple and representative of the place. And once you learn that that flag is Lexington's, you're not going to forget it. And you can make out that horse at a distance. And what I'm getting to, a sort of a sidebar, is we can summarize what's going on in good flag, bad flag with the principles of flag design and really narrow things down to two concepts. And that is, because a flag's basic purpose is signaling at a distance, the design has to do two things. The first, you need to be able to make it out when you see it flapping at a distance on both sides. So it needs to be discernible. And the second is, you need to be able to remember and connect what it looks like to the place it represents. It needs to be memorable, recollectible. You need to be able to say, I can see that big red dot on the flag, and I remember that's Japan's flag because it's the land of the rising sun. And those are the two things that flag designs need to do. And that's good flag, bad flag boils things down to 5 principles. That boils down to even 2. Anyway, so I think Lexington's really is a star flag for that, and I would have given it an A, an A+.
Yeah, I cannot think of another flag that even kind of comes close, like design wise.
Uh-huh.
Trying to think, like any other one with an animal on it doesn't have these exact colors or has some kind of flourish on it, like stars or something else like that. Yeah, and as you said, yeah, I mean, Lexington, what are they known for?
Yeah.
Is the Kentucky Derby in Lexington? I don't remember. Probably, right? I don't know. We'll look it up. The viewers and listeners can correct me if I'm wrong. But like in any case, Kentucky is known for all of that. And the blue horse on a white background. Yeah, I had not seen this one before you emailed me. But I actually like, and our listeners and viewers can relate to this, and probably yourself as well. But like, I kind of like had it stuck in my head for a bit of today. I was like, yeah, that Lexington flag is actually really cool, and it is like it skirts the line between what makes something simple and redrawable, because it's the horse itself is complex enough. It's not super complex. But for a kid to just have a white sheet of paper or, draw a white rectangle and draw a blue horse of their own liking on it, virtually, you're going to know what that is. You're going to know what they mean. You're going to know what it represents, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why, like, yeah, when you told me about this one, I was kind of floored by it. The fact that I had not seen it, because a lot of us, especially with the NAVA City Flag Survey, we looked at the top ones, we looked at the bottom ones, and I voted on all of them. But there were so many that I'm not going to remember every single one. I honestly kind of remembered this one a little bit. Let's go ahead and get to, you had a couple more that you wanted to go over, other than Lexington.
Sure, I'll talk about Old Town Maine. Old Town Maine, I think, was given an average rating below what I would have given it. Old Town Maine is I think it's a world-class design. It's a horizontal tri-bar of a narrow green stripe, a wide white stripe, and a narrow green stripe, and a red canoe on it.
Mm-hmm.
Old Town is known for its canoes, and anybody in that area of Maine would look at that, know that that's Old Town's flag, even without prompting, once they knew that it was a city flag. It was designed by middle schoolers in Old Town.
I was just going to ask, if I remembered right, yeah.
And they actually ran a contest between different designs and got the public to vote on the designs. And they ended up campaigning for that design. And that was the one adopted. I think it's just a super design.
I find it stunning, honestly. Same as you. And I was going to ask, like, kind of off of that, when I was talking to Philip Tibbetts, he was talking about how a lot of what they did with the Aberdeenshire and the Banffshire, Murray, like some of the newer flags, not exclusively, but a lot of what they did was go to schools. And these were, I think, like their equivalent of middle school and maybe even primary, but kind of around that age range, and had, kids design the flags more or less. And the one that they ended up picking for Aberdeenshire was basically a composite of two different kids' drawings, I think. I'm not sure about the Murray and Banff ones, but I'm sure they probably influenced them. Do you find that the able to be drawn by a child and kind of the simplicity that we look for in flags like Old Town and Lexington, they obviously go hand in hand, but...
Well, the principle of simplicity in Good Flag, Bad Flag, a shorthand way to understand it is to say a flag should be so simple that a child can draw it from memory. Now, the point of that is not to enfranchise children, but it's a good way
we don't want to do that.
Test whether it's a simple enough design. And what I find is children themselves, if you give them a big piece of paper and say, draw a flag, they'll put all kinds of junk on the flag. But I've had tremendous success giving them a sheet of paper with 4 or 9 rectangles that are 1.5 inches by 1 inch. That really small rectangles. Say, draw your designs in there. And I've had even kindergartners draw world-class designs when they were limited to that small rectangle.
Right.
And, out of the mouths of babes, we've seen great designs.
I mean, we really have. Like, it's something that I couldn't put into words, but it does feel like something that kind of goes both ways in that respect. I mean, if you put that in front of a child and they just drew a red circle in the centermost, of those rectangles, you might look at it for a second and be like, all right, that's not lazy. That's actually brilliant. You're on to something here.
That's right.
Yeah.
A good test of flag design, I think, is what I call the bicycle race test. I remember watching bicycle races, the Tour de France and things like that on the big screen, and they'll show the 20 highest rated people, who's in first place, second place, third place, all the way, 20 countries worth.
Yeah.
And they've got the image of the flag next to the person in the row.
Yep.
So big screen, little piece of the screen is the chart, little tiny flags. And, Slovakia and Slovenia, you're not going to tell those apart. Australia and New Zealand, you're not going to tell those apart. But boy, where the Japanese person is. The United States, Germany, France. And that's, I think, a really good test of a flag's effectiveness.
Gosh, right. Like how well you can recognize it on the almost most minimal level. That it can be, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. I don't know. Let me see. I don't know if we have time to go into Elk Ridge, Utah. I think we may have to go ahead and...
Well, I'll just say that Elk Ridge, Utah is a black elk on a horizontal tri-bar, and anybody in Utah who learns that's Elk Ridge's flag is not going to forget it.
Simple enough. Yeah. Harkens a little bit to the Lexington one, just in a tri-band, I guess. But in any case. All right, well, we've got to get to a break. I want to make sure we get as much of this as possible. So we'll go ahead and get to a break now. When we do come back, we are going to get into a little bit deeper into good flag, bad flag. Obviously, we've touched on it some now, but yeah, we'll have more with Ted Kaye and good flag, bad flag when we come back. Thanks. What's up, VexHeads, and welcome to an ad for a website. It's called stubforge.com, and what they do is they print actual paper tickets to events you've been to but probably had to use your phone to get into. For those of us who are collectors, which I assume is most of us, this is huge. I have started a spreadsheet of shows that I've been to but don't have tickets for, so I will be getting that bulk discount later that they offer. But a few years back, I did surprise my dad with some Paul McCartney tickets for his birthday, and I had to settle for printing some like QR code thing at work that legit, when I gave it to him, it took him a few seconds to even realize what it was. So Stubforge to the rescue. They print all their tickets on the same cardstock that all the sites and venues use. Their website is super intuitive and idiot proof, which I know because I have used it as an idiot. They offer bulk discounts, as I mentioned, for literally anything over one ticket. Like, you don't have to be moving like 50. And if you are looking to fill out your back catalog with shows you've seen, don't have tickets for, Stubforge is your new best friend. And as someone planning a wedding here in 2024, my own, I am not a wedding planner, I looked at their invites, and yeah, we are going to send out these cool tickets along with our RSVP stuff. So, in other words, there's a lot you can do with these things. In any case, as I said, most of us here are collectors of various stripes, so head on over to stubforge.com to do what us VexHeads always do, fill that collection up. Back to you, Andy, or another ad. All right, VexHeads, we are back. More with Ted Kaye. And Ted, before we get into good flag, bad flag itself, I would actually like for you to correct this sentence. Good flag, bad flag has 5 rules for flag design. How would you correct that?
Guiding principles instead of rules.
Guiding principles. I think that's what most people are missing. So go into that a little bit as far as them being guiding principles and not hard and fast rules.
Well, one of the challenges in creating good flag, bad flag was to have a title that would be catchy and have a construct that would help people understand what it was describing. And my solution was to give it the title Good Flag, Bad Flag. Thank you. And to provide examples of designs that followed a principle and examples of flags that didn't follow them so that we could drive a stake into them. And those were labeled good and bad. The problem with that is that it's a shorthand. Really, the title should be Effective Flag Design, Ineffective Flag Design. But that's not catchy enough.
It's not.
But what happened was people equated bad design with a bad flag.
Right.
And psychologically, when people heard that their flag was bad, they heard that their place was bad.
Yeah.
Because they equated their place with the flag. That's what flags do. And so we've got this tension between having a terminology and a catchy title and shorthand to talk about flag design without actually condemning the flag's value, which is what the words seem to do. So it's very important to talk about we're talking about the design of the flags, whether they're effective at achieving the basic purpose of a flag, which is signaling at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the principles of flag design aren't rules. And we're not saying if you don't do these, you will have a bad design. What we're actually saying is if you follow these, you will have a good design. And there are lots of exceptions to any of these. They are just guiding principles. And you led me to this good point, and that is they aren't rules, they're guiding principles to flag design.
Yeah, I think that is one of the most common misconceptions for people who maybe are a little bit more on the outside of flag design. And as you said, get that kind of visceral reaction to, oh, this flag is bad, I'm from this place, my place, whatever. And then they start to look more into it and they're like, well, these people don't know what they're talking about with all these rules, but it's constantly repeated as rules. Like that's the way that people frame it. And you couldn't be more clear that they're not rules. But I do understand having to walk.
It's easier to say this flag breaks the rules rather than this flag's design is inconsistent with solid design principles.
Right. And could be better.
Yeah.
I
now,
think
I
it's an
do
important...
like to say, when dealing with any flag design effort or existing flags, is that within every bad flag design, there's a good flag design trying to get out.
Right.
That you can almost always find ways to polish, hone, simplify a poor design or an ineffective design and get a better design out of it.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. I kind of like on that topic, I noticed that when on not rule 3, but guiding principle 3 here, which is use 2 to 3 basic colors. We've got the Dominican Republic and we've got Dominica. But doesn't the Dominican Republic flag, if I'm not wrong, normally have a coat of arms in the middle of it?
Well, this is something that's not familiar to Americans usually because we don't make this distinction. But sometimes places will distinguish between the flag on land and the flag on sea. And in those, the flag for the government and the flag for the military and the flag for the people, the civil flag.
Mm-hmm. So
there are different versions of the Dominican Republic flag based on what of those 6 uses the flag's put to. Whitney Smith, the father of modern vexillology,
go Terriers,
created a little symbol that's looks like a tic-tac-toe square, but with 6 places, and you put dots in them to show whether it's governmental, military, civil, and on the top, and land and sea on the bottom.
Yeah.
And in the United States, generally speaking, it's all 6 dots for each flag. That's what our national flag does. There's no different flag for the United States at sea.
Right.
But that's not the case in many countries. So
do you
That's what explains your thought about the Dominican flag.
Right. Yeah. I've been looking for someone to explain my thoughts. I'm glad we finally got there. No, I was going to ask, like, kind of off that point that you just made about the American flag. Do you think that has anything to do with the fact, I mean, I'll just say the American flag is probably the most recognized flag around the world just due to a bunch of different things. But do you think that's why the US kind of only feels the need to have one, or do you think there are other kind of historical things at play there?
I'm sure there's historical things at play.
Okay.
But to make a different point based on that, I believe that one of the reasons that we see so many seals on bed sheets as state flags and as city flags is this confusion about what the flag's supposed to represent. If the flag's supposed to represent the government of the place, then of course, put the seal on it. You know, that's the symbol of the government. But if the flag's supposed to represent the people of the place, the entire place, the seal has no place on that flag. And that's something I didn't realize 20 plus years ago when I compiled Good Flag, Bad Flag, but I've come to this realization that it's that people are confused about what the flag's supposed to represent. And the people choosing the flag, who are usually in the government, can't tell apart the idea of flag for the government and the flag for the entire, say, city.
The flag is coming from inside the house kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And they can't tell that the house isn't the entire place.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, when you talk to employees of a city government, they'll say things like, oh, it's the city's job to fix the potholes. Oh, the city owns that land.
Right. Yeah.
And what they really mean is the city government's job is to do that. Our city government owns that land.
Right.
And when I say I'm from this place, I don't want to fly the flag of the government of the place. I want to fly the flag of the place, the civil flag. But we don't make that distinction in the United States between civil, governmental, and military, generally speaking, for place flags. And therefore, the flag has to fulfill all the functions. And therefore, that's another argument not to put the seal on the flag.
Yeah. And I wasn't even fishing for an argument not to, but, you know, I think there are tons of them, and it's just, you know, we were bound to get to one of them. Anyway.
Indeed.
But yeah, okay. So I just really briefly wanted to touch on the fact that you describe yourself, self-describe, whatever, as a compiler of Good Flag, Bad Flag. And I know there are a lot of, well, there are folks credited other than yourself somewhere in here. I forget where.
Yeah, on the back page, there are 20 different people who had written on flag design whose work I looked through to create Good Flag, Bad Flag.
And I've talked to two of them, Dave and Lee.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Dave's episode will come out right before yours. So
great.
But like when you're compiling this with that many people, you're talking 20 plus people down here. Is it a true collaborative effort where you guys have like a group email, a group like whatever at the time going, and you're like, hey, I think we should word it this way. I think we should word it that way. Or does one person kind of bring ideas to the table and everyone else says yes or no to that? Like, I'm just curious what the process is with 20 other people. I've written a couple things myself, but just myself.
It was neither of those.
Okay.
What happened was at the 1999 Congress, International Congress, which was also a NAVA meeting in Victoria, BC.
Oh, that's
there was a panel discussion by flag retailers talking about flag designs that their customers were bringing to them, and they were universally deriding the quality of what their customers brought them. They talked about how horrible these designs were, and in the question and answer period, people were just piling on saying how terrible the designs were that the public was designing. And at the end of the discussion, I got up and said, wait a minute, how dare we as vexillologists criticize the public for designing poor flags if we don't give them any guidance on how to design good flags?
Sure.
We need a general purpose flag design guidebook. I know lots of you have written on flag design.
Right. Okay.
It hasn't gotten out there. And so what I did was I looked at the flag design writings of these 20 people. I actually assembled them all,
Gotcha.
and I put them all out on my dining room table, and I read each one, and I circled things, and I said, what are the common themes that these people are sounding? How
Right.
do
Okay.
I,
So you're funneling it down at this point,
yes,
kind of.
I
Yeah.
was distilling their wisdom.
Yes.
And, if somebody made a good point that wasn't echoed by a lot of other people, I'd say, okay, I'll put that in the other section. But it was very clear that these 5 principles were being sounded over and over and over again by these people who had written on flag design. The challenge was their own writings were wordy. They were not user friendly. They didn't provide examples of flags that didn't follow them, so they didn't put stakes in the bad ideas,
Hmm.
and they didn't have any way to reach the rest of the world. And so what I provided was the editorial work of distilling it. I hired a graphic designer to create an attractive book. NAVA, I gave the copyright to NAVA. NAVA published it. I financed the first publication of the hard copy, and it became, and we put it on the website, and it has become a way for the vexillological community to transmit vexillographic knowledge to the world of flag designers.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly, I mean, you and I in our email correspondence before, when we were kind of setting this up and everything, as I told you, and as I've told a few people in the Discord for the show, Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I live, is trying to come up with a whole city rebrand, part of which is going to be a new flag, because we changed ours to just a travesty of a flag, I think in like 2009, or it was mid 2000s or somewhere in there. And I emailed the mayor personally, and said, well, from the podcast account, because I wanted to make it look even a little bit more official. It's got flags in the title. And I said, hey, like anything that I can do to help. I definitely have thoughts on this. I know luminaries, such as yourself and everything. And I forget what else I said, but he eventually got back to me and said, yes, yes, and yes. Also, I have a copy of Good Flag, Bad Flag that I keep on my desk for those who want to know about graphic design. I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically that. And I was like, wow, if the mayor of Chattanooga, Tennessee, keeps Good Flag, Bad Flag on his desk, like, that's reach. That's, as you said, that's propagating it. That's getting the word out. And I'm so happy that so many public officials and or their like adjutants, etc., have a copy of this and are at least thinking about that.
I think that's great. I think part of it comes from constituents. Often, when you want to influence your public official, you'll give him something that will help support your cause. So I think constituents are getting to the public officials and saying, "Hey, we could do better here in our city." I think a very important thing has happened in the last 20, 25 years. And I'm actually giving a talk on this subject at the International Congress in Beijing in August. And the short version is state flag change in the United States, vexillologists on the inside. And I track several state flag change efforts that have been successful in the last 25 years. I'm starting with Georgia and Mississippi efforts in the early 2000s. And I count over 20 NAVA members who have played inside roles in those processes. If you go back before that, vexillologists were on the outside looking in, saying, how did this flag come about? How did this design get made? What's happening is we are now being invited to the inside. Just before joining you today, my previous call was with a city that has narrowed down its flag competition designs to 5 designs and have just polled the public and asked me what I thought of the 5 designs and how I would tweak the best design. And I said, look, I'm not a designer. I know good design when I see it. Here's a couple things you might do with this one.
Right.
And I was able to help them just a little bit farther along in their process. And I think they really are going to have a great design that gets adopted in their city. That kind of participation by vexillologists and vexillographers on the inside of flag design, I don't think was happening nearly as much before Good Flag, Bad Flag, and NAVA's surveys and the Roman Mars TED Talk.
Mm-hmm. And can you when you look at that, can you see a maybe not stark delineation, but some kind of delineation between the flags that were created before vexillologists were let into the room and those created after? Like, is it noticeable?
I haven't done that analysis. I'm sure somebody could. What I did was I started with the timing when I know that NAVA's work through surveys and Good Flag, Bad Flag, and all of our members getting involved after the Roman Mars TED Talk, that time period is one that I'm personally aware of who did what, where. And so that's where I've started.
Gotcha.
But certainly, I edited the American City Flags volume for Raven, which came out in 2004. And one of the sections of every article was how the flag came about.
Mm-hmm.
And
I had to get a back copy of that one, but I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. It's still in print, 25
somewhere back there,
20 years later. And I know that once in a while there'll be some, this person, like St. Louis's flag was designed by an art professor at Yale, and Portland's flag was designed by a professional graphic designer named Doug Lynch, who actually reviewed the vexillological literature that he could find. He actually used the word vexillology in 1969 when he designed the flag. But generally speaking, there weren't people who were aware of flag design getting involved on the inside of flag design efforts.
Right, because Whitney Smith didn't even invent the term till not long before that, I wouldn't think.
That's right.
Mid-60s, something like that?
1957. He was 17 years old.
Okay.
Yes.
Mid to late, yeah. Okay, gotcha. Anyway, again, go Terriers. Boston University professor and alum, Whitney Smith. Okay, yeah. One of the points that you touched on there, the survey, the polls, for lack of a better word. I have been a part of, or, I would say I voted in a lot of flag surveys. These will be usually organized on Tumblr. Our past guest from episode 49, Alex Tomberlin, organizes Tumblr ones. Flags That Go Hard from episode 51, he does ones on Twitter. And, despite like the flag wars and Flags That Go Hard names, it's basically just a which of these flags is better thing, and then there's tournaments and whatever. So I know the tournament format is different than what NAVA does. So given that, but I find that the NAVA surveys tend to come out with results that I 95% agree with, I would say. Sao Paulo just won. Do you know the Sao Paulo flag that's like the Nordic cross, but with the crest? It just won a competition, and it's not good, but they had so many Brazilian people vote for it. And I guess like at the end of the day, I'm curious what makes like the NAVA ones, like, are there kind of controls for stuff like that? Or what makes them more, I hesitate to use the word accurate, but more generally like agreeable with after the fact?
Yeah, we've done 3 major surveys in NAVA. There in 2001, we did a survey on state and provincial and territorial flags of the U.S. and Canada, 72 flags. Mm-hmm. Then 2004, after we published American City Flags, we did another survey of those 150 American City Flags. And then just last year, we finished the survey on new American City Flags. That's 300 flags. The first 2 surveys had 400 or 500 people responding to them, NAVA members and people who heard about the survey in the public. The more recent survey had, I think, 2,500 or so people responding from the public and also from NAVA.
Right.
And what we found, comparing NAVA members' scores to the public, is they're actually quite close, quite correlated. It's not that the public thought one way, NAVA thought the other way. We did find that NAVA members tended to be slightly more strict and, for poorly designed flags, and slightly more enthusiastic for well-designed flags. In other words, the slope was tilted a little higher to higher scores for well-designed flags and lower scores for NAVA for poorly designed flags.
Yeah, more ones and fives from NAVA members and more like twos and fours from non.
It's sort of, yeah, that idea. And an important thing that we did was we do our surveys on a scale of 0 to 10, which is a nice mathematical structure. So it means that the analysis is a little bit easier. But also we then just average the results. You know, how many, you know, whatever the scores were, we add them up and divide them by the number of people. So there were a couple reasons why we started doing the surveys. The first was I wanted to be able to refer to them in good flag, bad flag. I wanted to be able to say, this was rated the best. This was rated the worst. I want...
Looking forward,
and the timing didn't quite work out for that, but the more important thing was I was able to test good flag, bad flag. I was able to validate good flag, bad flag by comparing how well or how much a flag design followed the principles of good flag, bad flag, and how well it scored in the surveys. And by creating a way to score designs based on the good flag, bad flag principles, a very rudimentary one, 5 principles, you can get 0, 1, or 2 points based on each of those principles, adds up to 10 if it's all right, it's 0, none.
Yeah.
I just went through and I scored them. Some of the principles are very objective, like counting the number of colors. Some of them are subjective, how meaningful the symbolism is and things like that. But I scored them, and then I compared the scores. And if you're a statistics person, I got an R squared of like 0.85. I mean, 85% of the variation of people's scores was explained by how well the flags followed the good flag, bad flag principles. And this was the good flag, bad flag was on our website, but it's not like people had it open and then we're scoring the flags.
Right. Yeah.
This was independent. And to answer the question that you asked, though, why would these be more reliable? I think it's because we're crowdsourcing and everybody gets one vote, and we've got controls to keep from multiple voting, so the IP addresses are screened out, and we hold the polls over a certain amount of time, so lots of people have a chance to participate.
Right.
Again, though, they are just surveys. They're just indicators. But generally speaking, you know, when we can have a survey that surveys 300 or so flags, and some of them average 8 points, and some of them average 2 points, there are very different opinions being expressed. And the fact that those are averages, that there's a consensus around 8 points or a consensus around 2 points, means that these are strongly held opinions one way or another. And that means that we are truly getting from people what they think about flag design.
Right. Yeah. No, that all makes sense. I mean, yeah, especially having the controls and kind of rails on it and everything. I want to talk a little bit about something that you just mentioned there, but before we do, let's go to another quick break and be right back. All right, and we are back a little bit more with Ted Kaye here. And Ted, I think what we need to do for this section is get to some listener and viewer questions.
Great.
If you don't mind. So yeah, I'll go ahead and pull those up. We've got quite a few questions from folks in the Discord, which, VexHeads, if you're not in the Discord, what are you doing? You need to get in here. All right, Ted, I have got the Discord pulled up, and the first question here comes from Smix from New Vexillology. I had on episode 40-something, 47, let's call it. That is Max from Stockholm, Sweden. He wants to know if you have thoughts on Brian Cham's Dealbreakers of flag design, and if they may be the actual first step / most important in designing a good flag. And I think tied into that, he's asking how the good flag, bad flag principles were created. And yeah, just your thoughts on the weight of those, I think.
Sure. Brian Cham is a fantastic flag designer. He has been involved in helping hone the Utah flag and the Minnesota flag. He's also a mainstay of NAVA, and he and I work quite closely on several NAVA things. And I really salute the six deal breakers work that he did in trying to understand the public's uneducated reaction to flag designs. And that's the key difference between the 6 deal breakers and good flag, bad flag. And that is he has been able to document how people react when they don't know anything about flag design, but they're presented with a design saying, how about this one? And
yeah,
the reason I distinguish these is that often people will say about a flag design, oh, it's too simple. In fact, that's one of the deal breakers, is this is too simple of a design. That shouldn't be a way to say, oh, well, then we shouldn't do it. We should make it more complex. I think the answer is you either ignore the public because they just don't know, or you educate the public so that they will know. But the public, when Canada's flag was adopted, might well have said, well, this is too simple. But that's not a reason to abandon that design. It's a reason to educate the public on how good it is, or just say, here's what it is. I think 4 out of the other 6 principles of his deal breaker principles I don't have in mind, but I think they sort of map onto good flag, bad flag. So in some ways, it's interesting to put it this way: the public knows good flag design, and in some ways it doesn't.
Okay, yeah.
So this leads me to something that I've come to understand, or a realization I had after our New American City Flags survey that NAVA conducted last year, where 60% of the New American City Flags were rated and got grades of D or F. Only 30% got a B or an A. How is it? I mean, we've been educating the world on flag design for 20 years plus. Well, I think those competitions, to the extent they had competitions, did have good designs submitted to them. We have successfully educated the flag designers, but we haven't educated the flag choosers.
Right. Yep.
The people, the commissions, the committees, or the city councils who say, oh, well, that's too simple. Right. Or it needs to say the name of our place on it.
Yeah.
In other words, the deal breakers it answers a different question. It answers the question about selling the design to the public, as opposed to what would make an effective design. So those are orthogonal. They're not
at cross
answering
purposes.
the same question.
Yeah. So do you think, like I mentioned earlier, the mayor of my city has good flag, bad flag on his desk. Would you recommend like kind of using those in tandem with each other to like, does it paint like a fuller picture, or does one kind of, are they better used together separately, or one or the other?
They answer different questions and are used in different ways.
Okay.
When I advise cities or other organizations on the flag design process, I remind them that we've learned that the process is 10% design and 90% politics and public relations.
Right. Yeah.
And I would, in a simplistic way, I would say use good flag, bad flag on the design side, and use the 6 deal breakers list as part of understanding what the public relations needs to do.
Yes.
So I would square the circle that way.
That makes sense. That sounds perfect. See, I'm trying to get to a couple others. There's a lot to pick through, actually. Okay, yeah, one that we briefly touched on. I can't remember if we were on air or not, but it says this is from Scotta Goat at Scotta Goat on our Discord. For Ted, what are your thoughts on how city flags can connect cities outside of sports teams, icons, and logos? I've seen many people grouped together by sports teams, but the idea of falling in love with a city is something that I rarely run into, unlike the connections I see with sports fandoms.
Yeah, Roman Mars makes a very good point in his TED Talk in 2015 that when cities have poor iconography, poor flags, the vacuum gets filled by sports teams.
Right.
And we see this in states as well. In Kansas, the Kansas flag doesn't sell very well, but the big block K in red and white for University of Kansas is a top seller.
Just to briefly interject, I think we even see it in Australia with their football kits being completely different colors.
Certainly.
Sorry.
Well, you see that in lots of places that the sports teams fill that vacuum. Now, we are a tribal animal and we belong to many tribes, and we want to show our sense of belonging in those tribes with our symbolism. So we seek out flags to show that we belong to these various tribes. And if I'm in a city and I want to show I'm part of this city and the city has a terrible flag design, I'm going to search for something else that's citywide, and that's the sports team.
Yeah.
Now, there are cities with great flag designs like Chicago, where people use the Chicago flag, and that's showing they are a Chicagoan, not that they're a Bulls fan or that they're a fan of anything else in Chicago. That design means that I'm part of Chicago. Now, sometimes great city iconography will trickle back into the sports team logos. Michael Green has done some work on this.
Heard of him.
And the same thing happens in Portland, my city of Portland. You can tell I'm a fan. Here's my cell phone case.
Yep.
The Portland Timbers, our Major League Soccer team, its colors are the colors of the Portland flag. They even incorporate the Portland flag into their kit.
Right.
But the basic idea is that cities can aspire to symbolism to represent the city as a whole, and that will eventually supplant what the sports teams' symbolism does, because the sports teams are filling a vacuum. That's my theory.
Gotcha. Makes sense. They are right. People are latching onto that in the absence of a good city symbol, whereas, as you say, in cities with a good city symbol or city flag, rather, the team latches onto that, and then you can, as a fan, latch onto both. Yeah.
There you go.
That makes total sense. I've got a question from Kryštof Hook, and he does say, if you want a little bit of spice for the questions. So,
I had the honor of sitting next to Kryštof last year in Ljubljana, two years ago in Ljubljana. He was seated at my table when his name was called to honor him for having delivered the best paper at the International Congress.
Yeah, he showed me the award for that. It's very cool. That is an honor. I have yet to, let's put it that way, I've yet to meet him in person. But yeah, that's definitely in the cards at some point. Anyway, as he says, if you want a little bit of spice for the questions, and I'll just word it how he did, ask him if he's aware of the backlash against NAVA. And he said, as a parenthetical, even maybe seen a few attacks against Ted himself in regards to the various city and state flag change efforts, how they view it, how they plan to combat it, and whether they plan to change anything in their approach in the future. Did that make sense?
Yes. I think. Okay. So, yes, there are people who, well, let me put it bluntly, many people don't like change.
Yep.
So change itself, no matter what that change is, there's a bias against change.
Yes.
And when we get to symbols that are so emotionally important because they connect to the place we are a member of, connect to our tribal identity, people feel very strongly about flags. And then when there's an effort to change the flag, especially if the words are, this is a bad flag, that
Right.
challenges people's identity and they're going to be upset about it.
Yeah.
So, and
it's that
try and
visceral thing that you talked about earlier, people associating the flag with the place with the, oh, now I'm bad kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And the media doesn't help us when it says NAVA has rated this a poor flag. When
Agreed.
we say, no, we held a survey and the results of the survey said it was the public who said it was a poorly designed flag.
Mm-hmm.
The media will just condense that down to NAVA says bad flag.
Yeah.
And so that means we're a target, even though we shouldn't be, and we didn't want to be.
Right.
So what we are changing or trying, we actually, when we recast good flag, bad flag, we put quotes around good and bad.
I actually was going to ask about that, if those were always there.
And we put an extra note on the back to try to deal with these. Now, I don't think that affects what most people say, but it's going in the right direction to if somebody reads the note on the back, say, oh, we're not criticizing the place. We're trying to help improve the design of the flag for the place.
And everyone always reads the notes on the back of a pamphlet. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But we put it in quotes, and that was a way to try to help deal with that. But fundamentally, we are the convenient target for somebody's concern about changing something that's important to them.
Yeah.
We may have provided people with ammunition to, the Roman Mars TED Talk and our surveys and stuff, to go to their elected officials and say, hey, we can do better. But NAVA itself does not advocate changing flags. NAVA does not ever go to a city and say, you've got a poor design, you should change it. We are agnostic at that.
Right.
NAVA is a vexillological organization, not a vexillographic organization.
Right. I was going to say that's antithetical.
A lot of people are interested in vexillography, but we're the students of flags.
Mm-hmm.
So we are not proactively trying to change flags. But because our resources are used by those who are, the attack comes back at us.
Well, and because when anyone asks anyone their opinion on flag change, it's NAVA, or it's you personally in a lot of cases, or it's an easy lightning rod, I guess, for stuff like that, and it's the most obvious one, as you said.
Well, I was a few years ago, I was asked to be the technical advisor to the National Flag Committee of Fiji. And
sure, yeah, and
then I was named to the committee. So I was one of 13 members of the National Flag Committee for Fiji. And I was in Fiji for a week helping the committee.
Oh, you poor thing.
I dropped in the middle of their process. So I didn't help to design the process, which was the problems they had. But we had about 2,000 designs that I coached the committee to narrow down and hone. And in Fiji, the government had about 63% in the previous election, so it was had a big majority in parliament. But there was a significant opposition in Fiji, and the two newspapers in Fiji, the Fiji Sun and the Fiji Times, were aligned, one with the government and one with the opposition. And just like what we have in the United States, negative politics, that negative partisanship, if you like it and you're from one side and I'm from the other, I automatically don't like it. Doesn't matter what the idea is. If you like it, I don't. Well, that was certainly the case in Fiji. The opposition, to get to my point about attacks, the Fiji Sun covered our efforts every day. They front page on the Fiji Sun every day about how the flag committee was working. There's pictures of me holding up the designs and things. There was a camera crew there, the whole thing. It was just laudatory. The paper that supported the government. The opposition paper was editorializing against the flag change.
Yeah.
They noted that the opposition had submitted 7,000 proposals
Oh my God.
for the flag.
And they said that is like a good thing?
The opposition had submitted 7,000 proposals that were ignored by the committee.
Oh.
Well, every single one of the 7,000 proposals was the old flag. But
like with even a slight change, or just they were all that?
Yeah,
There
they
was
were
no
all,
that.
they're
Okay.
all here's the old flag. 7,000 want the old flag. Only 2,000 want a new design, obviously.
So they were hoping like some poor clerk has to go through and like look at all these and like be like, no, no. I don't know what the hope is there.
The editorializing
Anyway.
was personal attacks on me.
Sure.
Why do we need a white man to come here and tell us what our flag should look like?
Okay.
I was the devil. And so, those things happen when we are we're the tools or provide the tools for these changes that are threatening or concerning to people.
Yeah. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the question or like the answer to it is just by default, because we're the ones that do that. And you are the most public facing member of NAVA that does that. So
yes,
it almost is a by default thing. And like you said, people hate change. There's change. They're going to come to NAVA. Oh, NAVA said it's a bad, even if NAVA didn't say that. Yeah.
Well, and I'll jump in and say that not everybody agrees with the principles in Good Flag, Bad Flag. And although I compiled it, it's a consensus. It's not a unanimous set of opinions. Europeans have a different design sense. There are other cultures that have different design senses. And there are people who actually just violently disagree with some of the ideas in Good Flag, Bad Flag. And sometimes it's orthogonal, like the Dealbreakers.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we just plain disagree with this. But what I found, and Roman Mars emphasizes this, is the design community, people who are professional designers.
Yes.
Roman Mars says, these are actually just the basic principles of design. You just talked about flags.
Like not flag design, just design writ large.
And I took that as a huge compliment, because I'm coming at this not as a designer, but really as an editor, saying, what do all these people think? Let's put it into a 16-page book.
Right.
But I think being out there and advancing the cause of good flag design is bound to make me a target, and make NAVA a target, and make others who are in this field targets as well. And we just have to grin and bear it, because I think the outcome of helping cities and states and others get more successful flag designs is a wonderful thing. I mean, I'm a big fan of Minnesota's new flag. I actually made this up the morning that they adopted this design, so I would have it to fly for media interviews.
Well, that's sure something. I don't have anything nice to say about the Minnesota flag, so I'm not going to say anything at all. That's how I was taught.
That's very Minnesotan of you, even if you're not a Minnesotan.
That may be fair. I actually kind of rolls into the very final question that we have here. I will be in Minnesota later this year at NAVA 58. So, I'll see you there and see a few others there as well. But just a really quick last question, because I know we have to wrap up here, but I thought this was important for prospective members and people that are thinking about going to 58 to hear. Alex Knight 002 asked, due to there being talks about changes in upcoming annual meetings, I'd like to hear more about how these meetings will change in the future, and hear more about what NAVA is doing to reach new members. So like really quickly, just kind of the changing state of NAVA, and more specifically the meetings themselves and attracting new members. Like what's the strategy, or what's the future there?
Well, two things about attracting new members. 10 years ago, we had 20 members who were in the student or the associate under 18 category. 20.
Right.
Now we've got 320.
So that's approximately 300 more.
Yeah. Order of magnitude and a half more.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
15 times.
The face of NAVA is changing. We're attracting lots more younger people. As far as annual meetings go, 2020 was a game changer for all sorts of organizations, including NAVA.
Right.
And what we learned in 2020 with the pandemic is on 2 months' notice, we had to cancel our in-person meeting and convert to a virtual meeting. And then the next year we had to do it again.
Yep.
Third year, third time's a charm. Amber Atterbury led us into St. Augustine for the NAVA meeting there.
Love Amber. She's great.
And what we learned with that first virtual meeting was we don't all have to fly across the country to be in the same room to talk to each other about flags.
Mm-hmm.
And the light went off in my head. Somebody said, oh, well, we should do these maybe twice a year then, 2 virtual meetings a year. And I said, no, we should do them every week. And we're there. We'll have more than 50 interest area meetings online, sponsored by NAVA this year.
Yeah.
So we've broken the bounds of geography to be able to connect people with each other to talk about flags.
Mm-hmm.
So we have interest area meetings. We have some series that the same one happens or same topic every month or every 2 months. We have single topic meetings. We've now got a program that we've started for youth. Elementary school has a program, middle school, and then high school have youth meetings. We've only had a couple so far, and we plan them for every 2 months. The response that we got was we got lots of positive feedback from the kids involved and one common negative comment. And the negative comment was, these aren't frequent enough. We want them every month.
It's not a bad note to get. Yeah.
So we're converting them to monthly from bi-monthly.
Right. And
basically, where we're bandwidth limited is the volunteers to help run these.
Sure, right.
So
honestly, yeah. We should talk about that later too.
Yeah.
I was going to say.
So anyway, just answering the question, what NAVA's doing about NAVA meetings is we are holding annual meetings as we always have, but we are making them hybrid so that people can watch them real time, or if not, we record all of them. And thank you, Andy, for being part of the recording for the last one, so that people can watch them asynchronously off our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And we're having all of these interest area meetings.
Yeah. A lot of the behind the scenes, a lot of the same stuff Ted and I are recording with right now was also used at NAVA 57. My Zoom, my stand, my like a lot of this stuff.
There you go. And
yeah.
Tara Stark, who's the designer of the Keystone flag behind you. Thank you, by the way, for the Kaye flags that you put behind. That I like that especially.
This one?
Yeah. No, tell me what that one is.
That is my hometown of Knoxville, Tennessee.
Knoxville. Okay, I love the Kaye flags. Anyway, Tara Stark, who designed the Keystone flag, was part of the tech crew there.
Yes, a very big part. Yeah, we honestly, I don't know if I could have done it without her. She might have been able to do it without me, but I don't know. I think we made a good team up there. So,
well, I think a very important a serious note, is that NAVA is a volunteer organization.
Mm-hmm.
None of us are paid anything to do this. We're doing this to advance vexillology. The only significant bills we pay are to the professional designers who do our publications, but otherwise it's all volunteers, and it's thousands of hours a year to make NAVA go, and that's the work we're doing to support new members who join NAVA.
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many things that I didn't get to with you here.
Well, we need to have episode number 2.
I was going to say, as mentioned, you'll have to come on again to get to a lot of this. A lot of which does include, probably a little bit more on the inner workings of NAVA. Some of which we got to, but not all of it. That being said, we do need to start winding down, unfortunately, this time. And Ted, as my guest, I'll give you first goes at it, but where can people find you, follow you, or find and follow NAVA? Anything that you want people to get eyes and ears on, put it out there.
Sure. The best place to go is nava.org, which is NAVA's website. There's a huge amount of resources related to flags there. But also I'm the editor of the newsletter for the Portland Flag Association. And so you can see Portland Flag Association information at portlandflag.org. So portlandflag.org and nava.org are the places to see where I'm hanging my flag hat.
Perfect. Perfect. Yes, next time you're on, I got some questions about the Portland one too we didn't get to. But anyway, for listeners, viewers, you probably know where to find and follow the show. But if you don't, on any @based platform, we are @flagged4content, for like the number. If you want all of our links compiled into one thing, linktree.com/flagged4content has a little bit of everything, including a guest request form. You can put your own name in there. You can put somebody else's name in there that you'd like to see on the show, what have you. I think that's pretty much it. I'd like to keep that a little bit short and sweet here, because I had something really long and detailed for my outro here. So I'm going to find that now. Ted, I can't find it. Do you have anything that could maybe lead us out of this?
Keeping our standards high. This is Flagged for Content signing off.
Whew. I'm going to use that as a soundbite. Thank you so much. All right. Yes, thank you, Ted. Thanks, listeners, viewers. Awesome sign off, and we will catch y'all on the fly side. Take care. All right, cool. We got it.
You're on the flag side. I like that.
Yeah, I catch you on the fly. Most of my best stuff is something that I come up with off the cuff. If I think too much about it, I'm gonna. Flag for Content is proud to be sponsored by Flags for Good. Go to flagsforgood.com for more information.